Imagine a religion that swept across the entire Roman Empire. I mean, from the deserts of Syria all the way to the misty frontiers of Britain. It was the faith of soldiers, of merchants, of the guys running the empire. And yet, it left behind not a single sacred text. No gospels, no doctrines, nothing. All we have are these silent, underground temples. Today, we're stepping into those shadows to decode the enigma of Mithras. So, our whole investigation really begins in places just like this. Archaeologists have found hundreds of these cave-like temples. They're called Mithraea, all over the old empire. And they were always built underground, intentionally dark, kind of intimate. Now, according to the ancient philosopher Porphyry, this wasn't just some architectural quirk. No, the cave was designed to be a symbol of the entire cosmos, a little model of the universe. So to even begin to understand this lost faith, we have to become archaeological detectives. We're piecing it all together from the silent evidence its followers sealed away deep underground. Okay, so formally, Mithraism was a Roman mystery cult. And the key word there is mystery. This was not a public religion with big open festivals, not at all. All of its core rituals and beliefs were revealed only to initiates, and only after they passed through a series of really demanding grades. The secrecy? That's exactly why we don't have a Mithraic Bible to read. The knowledge was meant to be experienced, not written down. Now, the name Mithras, it has some seriously deep roots. You can trace it all the way back to an ancient Indo-Iranian god named Mithra, who was a god of contracts, of light. But the Roman version that pops up in the 1st century CE, that was something new. It was a kind of synthesis, blending those ancient roots with Roman ideas about astrology and a whole new strict hierarchy. And this new version spread like wildfire. It was carried along the arteries of the empire, the trade routes, the military roads, by the very people who kept that empire running. And then, almost as quickly as it rose, it just vanished by the 5th century. All right, if we want to crack the code of what these initiates actually believed, we have to turn to the single most important piece of evidence they left behind. It's an image so central, it was found in every single temple. This is it, the tauroctony, the bull-slaying scene. This is the absolute heart of the Mithraic Mysteries. Every single Mithraeum had one, right at its focal point. You see Mithras, you see the bull, a dog, a snake, a scorpion, a raven, and 2 guys holding torches. But what does it all mean? For decades, this single image has been the central puzzle for scholars trying to understand this cult. When it comes to what this thing means, there are really 2 major schools of thought. The traditional theory, the one championed by the legendary scholar Franz Cumont, says it's basically a scene from a Zoroastrian creation myth, where the death of this divine bull gives birth to all life on Earth. But a more modern interpretation, pushed by scholars like David Ulansey and Roger Beck, argues it's not a myth at all, it's a map. And this newer astrological theory is, well, it's fascinating. It suggests that the entire scene is a complex diagram of the stars, and its purpose was to represent a massive cosmic event, the precession of the equinoxes. You know, that slow wobble of the Earth's axis that causes the constellations to shift over thousands of years? In this view, Mithras isn't just some hero. He's a god, powerful enough to move the entire cosmos. And look at this. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The bull is pretty clearly the constellation Taurus, the dog is Canis Minor, the snake is Hydra, the scorpion, Scorpio, and Mithras himself, he lines up with the constellation Perseus, which is located right above Taurus in the night sky. This wasn't just art, it was a cosmic blueprint, a secret that only initiates would ever understand. Okay, so this complex cosmology brings up a huge question. Who was so drawn to a faith built on secret star maps and underground rituals? Well, the answer seems to lie, primarily, with the legions. This quote right here really gets to the heart of it. Mithraism is often called a soldier's religion, and for a very good reason. It wasn't just about what you believed, it was a brotherhood. For soldiers stationed thousands of miles from home in hostile territory, this cult provided a powerful network of loyalty and support that perfectly mirrored the structure of the army itself. You can see why it was so appealing. For one, it promised personal salvation to men who face death every single day. Its structure of 7 initiation grades, from Raven all the way up to Father, offered a familiar ladder to climb, just like the military ranks. It valued courage and discipline, virtues that were central to being a Roman soldier. And as legions were transferred across the empire, they just took their secret god with them, setting up new Mithraea wherever they went. Of course, because Mithraism was booming at the exact same time and in the same places as early Christianity, people have been making comparisons for centuries. But how deep do those similarities really go? Well, this is a major and sometimes tricky scholarly debate. Let's start with the most famous claim of all. The idea that Mithras' birthday was on December 25th, and that Christians just co-opted it for Christmas. You see this everywhere online. But what does the actual evidence from the time say? Yeah, this claim is a perfect example of the problem. As the historian Roger Beck puts it, this is one of that hoariest of facts. The December 25th festival was for Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, a general state god. And yeah, Mithras was associated with the sun, but he was a totally distinct entity. There's not a single ancient source that says Mithras himself was born on that day.
Okay, how about the whole idea of salvation? Some have suggested that the bull's blood in the Torah Loctony was part of some salvation ritual, which sounds an awful lot like the symbolism of the Eucharist in Christianity. Is there any solid evidence for that?
Well, the main piece of evidence comes from one single, badly damaged inscription from a Mithraeum in Rome. The line is often translated as, "And you have saved us in the shed blood." But, and this is a huge but, the critical scholarly finding is that the word for "you have saved," sarvasti, is just a modern guess to fill in a gap in the stone. The original archaeologist who studied it confirmed it can't be correct, so the entire theory is resting on a word that isn't actually there. So the big takeaway from modern scholarship is this. Rather than one religion directly ripping off the other, it's much more likely that any similarities popped up because both Mithraism and Christianity grew up in the same diverse, multicultural Roman world. They were, breathing the same cultural air, and sometimes they used similar symbols to express very different ideas. And this brings us to the final chapter of our mystery. Why did a religion that was so powerful, so widespread among the empire's military backbone, just fade away? I mean, you just look at this timeline and the story is stark. Mithraism hits its absolute peak in the 3rd century, which was a time of great instability in the empire. But then, in the 4th century, its fortunes just completely reverse. And that decline lines up almost perfectly with the rise of Christianity as the official state-sponsored religion of Rome. The archaeology gives us a really clear picture of this transition. All across the empire, we see this pattern. Right here, under the Basilica of San Clemente in Rome, there's a perfectly preserved Mithraeum. And what did they do? They built a Christian church directly on top of the pagan holy site. It's a powerful architectural statement of replacement, of dominance. Now, the traditional story is that Christians just violently went around smashing these sites. And look, we have ancient accounts of that happening, for sure. But modern archaeology has added some important nuance. As scholars have pointed out, it's actually really difficult to tell the difference between intentional destruction and damage just caused by centuries of neglect or earthquakes or simple decay. The evidence isn't always as clear-cut as a simple story of iconoclasm might suggest. And so, we're left with this question, one that was first posed by the historian Ernest Renan over a century ago. What if? If history had zigged instead of zagged? If Christianity had never gotten that imperial favor, would we be living in a world shaped not by the cross, but by the tauroctony? It's a huge question, and the answer? Well, it's lost to time, sealed forever in the silence of those underground temples.